Right, let's move on, go down a few divisions and talk about Keith Hill at Tranmere. Keith Hill, a manager who I've always enjoyed, Mike. I've always enjoyed listening to. Something about the way he approaches life and indeed the game that you can't help but buy into. And there was a really, really interesting post-match interview following their 2-2 draw this weekend. He was reflecting on the match itself. He was reflecting on his side reaching the final of the Papa John's Trophy as well. And this was just, to me, anyway, Mike, other people might think differently, but this was just 12 minutes of pure entertainment.
Yeah, he's good value in post-match interviews. We did a hangout call on the Foxpunter website not so long ago, and one of the guys on the call turned around and said, he's almost like this head teacher character that brings you into his office and tells you the way the world works, and he's like this real philosopher type character, and that's it nailed it perfectly for me. He's become so philosophical as he gets older with more experience. It's almost like every single game he goes away and muses about it, for hours and thinks, how does this game fit my perspective on life? And and then the following week the press conferences are just these, it's just this 10-minute long philosophy of, most managers do 3, 4, 5-minute interviews. Keith Hill's more than capable of going on for beyond 10 minutes comfortably each week, and can get really abstract really quickly in the way he takes a question about a football match and how this applies to his marriage and life and all of these different aspects away from the game, and tries to put all these things into a context that he wants people to see it from this context. He's kind of comes from the perspective of, so many people have got it wrong. They're looking at life the wrong way. They're looking at football the wrong way. They need to see it this way. And it's just like, this is constantly the theme that runs through all his post-match press conferences.
He's definitely gone more like that, though, hasn't he, as the years have gone on? Because I think back to how he was at Rochdale, and he definitely didn't take that approach. Maybe a little bit more so at Barnsley, definitely more so at Bolton. And then he's arrived in the Wirral, and he seems to have ramped it up another notch.
Yeah, I think with each passing job, I think he becomes more battle hardened or long in the tooth in terms of, the way he thinks about things. He's always been very future focused. He's always, he said that in his latest press conference. He's always looking towards the future. I think when he was at Rochdale, the future was playing out in front of his eyes. It was all very exciting. He was breaking new ground, and I think he was more in the here and now because so many exciting things were happening. I think what happens is, and what has happened since, is he can imagine this future that he wants to create, but it's always very long term. It's always very, it's always about staying on an even keel now. And he's always trying to manage the emotions of everybody around him. I think he's very sensitive to things that are potentially damaging. And he's got this imagined future he wants to create, but he's often so far off into the future. It's going to take so long to get there that anybody that can't see what he's trying to build right now, he gets really sensitive about, here and now criticism. That's not looking at the bigger picture. That's a 2-2 draw at home to Oldham, and he was getting all sort of mimicking people freaking out about a 2-2 draw. That and he wants everyone to keep emotions on an even keel. He understands the emotional impact of what surrounds a team, and whereas Jurgen Klopp, we just talked about, tries to control that emotional impact, Hill is sensitive to it. He's aware of the impact it can have, but he's not necessarily it's not effortless for him to control it, but he wants to control it. He wants to tell people, no, don't do that. This is going to, this is not helping. And he's really sensitive to it. So I think that's kind of the way he's changed. It's in his early days at Rochdale, he was very much in the here and now and just enjoying the moment because he was living the future then, and now he's not so much. He's got this imagined future that nobody else can see as well as he can, and everybody's doing little things to damage it. So that's kind of where he's at.
Is that sort of the difference then between an elite manager and just a very good manager, in that Jurgen Klopp, you talked about there, is able to manage those emotions, control the emotions in and out of the dressing room. You said there Keith Hill wants to do that, but doesn't always quite know how to approach it in the right way. Is that sort of a major notable difference then between stepping up between the levels?
I don't think it's about stepping up between the levels. No, I think it's just the difference in their personality types. I mean, if we're going to make a comparison with Keith Hill, I think Arsene Wenger is probably the best one historically. You know, there was you think back to the beginning of Arsene Wenger's reign at Arsenal. He was very much in the future. This was an imagined future that was playing out in the here and now with the Arsenal team, and we all saw Arsene Wenger at his very best. But then there was a level of expectation that came in later years that Wenger couldn't live up to, and was kind of always fighting fires of people not getting on the same page as him, and that, you know, this is not going to happen here and now. We're trying to build towards something. And I think he became a bit battle hardened in the same sense. So if the question is, can, you know, a manager like Keith Hill take steps up the levels because of it? He's not. I don't think personality type is standing in the way. You know, I just think we're making a comparison between two managers who just happen to be at different levels, using the same functions but in different strengths. And I think Klopp's strength, you know, in times like now, when at the beginning of something like this, Hill could possibly do with being a bit more forceful, but it doesn't make, you know, the strengths and weaknesses to every personality type, and this is just what his personality type is.
And again, a major difference is that we see emotions regularly from Klopp, whereas Keith Hill actively says, I don't do emotional drama. That's why I've been married for 30 years. He keeps saying as well, you can't react every time you play a game. You've got to flatline your emotions. No emotional judgment on this result. So he's very much tempering everything, isn't he?
Yeah, that's it. He's trying to manage emotions in the sense that he's always trying to keep them on an even keel. He wants everybody to have this sense of perspective that he's got. But some people are reactionary and aren't like he is. But because he's just very sensitive to it. But it's a strength because he's aware of what is potentially damaging. And he tries to get in ahead of time of what might potentially damage what it is I'm trying to do. So we can seem overly sensitive sometimes because, you know, it might be a remark from a local reporter that frames a game in a certain way that's not helpful going forward. And he can seem overly sensitive to it and very sensitive. And it's because he's aware of the impact that could have. If this narrative takes hold and continues, then I'm never going to get to where I want to get, because I'm not going to be able to, you know, follow through on this plan because these emotions of other people are getting in the way. And it is a strength to understand how these emotions from outside can impact. But it feels like almost as if, you know, it would be easy to look from the outside and say, oh, emotions aren't a strength for Keith Hill. He gets emotional, you know, freaks out about other people getting emotional. But it's because he's so sensitive. He understands how these emotions work. He understands the impact they can have, and he's very sensitive to them.
So he had great success at Rochdale. He now finds himself at Tranmere, and they've managed to reach the final of the EFL Trophy. They've also, of course, still at the right end of the table as things stand. So he's had, you know, plenty of success, but a few notable disappointments as well. Primarily thinking Bolton last season, his hometown club, described as his dream job as well. But it didn't quite go right for him. Lots of factors at play, Mike, but was there any blame on Hill's part, do you think?
I think he was dealt a very bad hand, of course. The circumstances he came into, it was a job he was never, ever going to turn down, his hometown club. Bringing the band back together with David Flitcroft and, you know, two Bolton lads running Bolton Wanderers. And it was the dream job he was never going to turn down. But he was kind of, you know, it was a hospital pass of a job, I guess. In the end, though, it kind of reached a point, you know, he was so focused on the future and trying to reinvent the culture, change the culture, right from, you know, a clean slate, let's start again and build this culture up. But working to such a long-term plan, I think it was unrealistic to get the fans to buy into that such long-term thinking after they'd been on the back of such disappointment. And I think in the end, you know, I think Hill could have had nobody could have complained that Bolton would have been relegated last season with a points deduction. But what manifested in the end was a team that would have been relegated anyway without the points deduction. And I think that didn't really leave Hill with a leg to stand on in the end. And I think he was so long-term focused that he was never getting the performances he wanted in the here and now, because it's almost like the message into the players was, we're building for the future, we're building a culture, and that this performance right here and now is not the be-all and end-all. And I think what the Bolton players possibly needed to hear more often last season was, it's all about this game. We need to sort our act out. We need to get it together right now. And the messaging just didn't work. And in the end, he could have no complaints. So it's easy to see what Hill was trying to do. And it was all along the right lines. You know, if somebody could turn around and say, here you go, Keith, 4 years. Nobody's going to say a word. We're just going to let you get on with it for 4 years. I think he would have got it right. But you don't get that time in this day and age, you know, the way football is nowadays. And I think Ian Everett's been dealt a much better hand at that club, given what Hill had to deal with first. And going second, he's had the gift of going second, basically. And so, you know, that's kind of what went wrong for Hill. It was a timescale thing. He wanted way too much time that he was never going to get. And in the end, he could kind of have no complaints with it.
Well, the owners at Tranmere, pretty good. You know, they tend to give managers a bit of time. So he should be able to build something here, Mike. He's got decent foundations and he's inherited a very good squad as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, when he came into the job at the beginning of the season, you know, you looked at Tranmere and the big concern was Mike Jackson. Is he experienced enough? Can he do the job? You know, and there was all these big question marks. And you're thinking, even at the beginning of the season, you're thinking, Tranmere are a top 7 outfit. They should be in the top 7 come the end of the season. You look at the experience they brought into the, you know, James Vaughan at the top of the pitch, keep him fit. Lots of experience there, Jay Spearing. Local lads, Merseyside-based players that were going to be settled in their home lives during this difficult period. And you just looked, everything's in place for a top 7 outfit. Keith Gill came in and was basically talking, you know, we should be in the top 7, we should be talking up promotion. Then results started to turn a little bit. They dropped down the table and he's trying to manage them expectations. He saw the damage that the emotions could do of people automatically expecting a top 7 finish. But that's where Tranmere should be, and that's where they are now. And now he's on top of the job again, and that they are where they should be. And I think this will always be the thing with Hill. I think when things are running according to plan and according to expectations, he is a better manager at doing the job in the here and now that he needs to be doing with the players. I think once things slightly turn against and results go, his focus turns kind of outward, and it's like trying to manage, like, whoa, steady your expectations. This is not going to help us in this net, trying to get out of this difficult period. You know, so I think there's always potentially going to be this nip and tuck there now with Tranmere, because there is a level of expectation that should be in the top 7. You know, it's good for him that they've got a Wembley trip, because they've had a lot of Wembley trips in recent years and a taste of Wembley. So he's kind of already measured up to that expectation of the customary Wembley trip. So they should still be expecting top 7 this season, and I think that should be the target. But it is his first season. I think any manager, you bring them into a club, I think you bring them in mid-season, you can always give them a little bit of leeway in that half season, but then the expectations need to be met in the first full season. And I think, you know, they're going to be borderline top 7 come the end of the season. Whether they get in or not, they've got to be top 7 and potentially looking at automatic next season.
And yeah, he was rightly proud of his side's achievement. He said, look, you may, you know, pour scorn on this competition, but the 64 teams started and we're down to the last 2 and we're going to Wembley, quite frankly. So, you know, you can't really knock that. Also, just wanted to touch on what you said there about players in Merseyside being settled, and the players at Bolton, when he was trying to create a long-term vision, a lot of them were short-term contracts, loanees, players who knew they were moving on at the end of the season. I guess here at Tranmere, one of the things, like you say, players that are settled, but also players on longer-term deals who, when Keith Hill says, look, I'm building up for the next few years, they're in, aren't they? They're there. They're going, yeah, I'll join you. I'm not thinking about being at other clubs. I'm not worrying about where I am next season. I'm here at Tranmere and I'm going to fight for the cause.
Yeah, there's an interesting dynamic at Tranmere, actually, you know, that kind of fits in with Keith Hill's career, but, you know, it's different for him. At Rochdale, he created this environment for young players to thrive. and to not be afraid to make mistakes. And there was no pressure at a club like Rochdale. You know, he was able to create that environment that he wouldn't create at other clubs. And then once there's a level of expectation came in that Rochdale were now a League One club and they'd finished 9th or something in the division and they were expected to be punching well above the weight in terms of budget, then Hill got sensitive. He got sensitive to outside noises or the fans behind the dugout and what people were saying and the criticism that was coming his way. And then he went to Bolton, and like you say, it's short-term contracts. He's trying to sell a long-term vision. It's not easy to do. You know, it's not compatible. Now he arrives at Tranmere, and I'm not sure that necessarily these older players would be the types of players, senior players would be the types of players that Hill wants to work with, or would he give him an open budget to go and get whoever he wants. I don't think he'd be going buying 30-odd-year-old players. And we talk about a long-term vision. I think these older players in the Tranmere dressing room have to set a culture for the players that Hill might later bring through, and that they can be guiding lights to younger players that will eventually come through. But I don't think these are necessarily the players that Hill would work with. And it'll be an interesting dynamic to see how he keeps 30-odd-year-old players happy if they're potentially becoming tired later in the season and things like that, dropping players. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work. But it's an interesting dynamic because it's something different again from what he's had in his career. So I think the locally based players and the senior pros who can set standards behind the scenes for him is potentially a very good thing. But it'd be interesting to see how he manages it and what the long-term plan looks like, because the long-term plan isn't necessarily with Jay Spearing and James Vaughan. They're going to have to find new players 2 years down the line, you would imagine. They're going to have to phase in new players. So these players are vitally important now in setting the culture. But it'd be interesting to see what the long-term vision is for Hill in terms of who comes through as the next cycle.
And finally, this was mentioned on your Hangout call, actually. Hill's most, best period was alongside Chris Beech at Rochdale. Chris Beech now doing a superb job in the same division as Hill at Carlisle. Chris Beech very much a man who just gets stuff done, almost a sort of bish, bash, bosh approach, problem solved. Does Keith Hill need someone alongside him who has that mindset, with Hill tending to beat around the bush a little?
Yeah, I mean, this potentially goes back a little bit to what we've just been saying about Jurgen Klopp, in that, the support network around him is important, because I think when you're a manager that understands emotional impact and the way things that surround the dressing room can impact on the team performance on the pitch on a Saturday and your long-term vision, I think there's been a pattern. We always associated Keith Hill with David Flitcroft initially, but his best years were with Chris Beech, who's very logistical and very getting things done and getting through a lot of work quickly and getting to the heart of a logical problem very quickly. And we talk about Hill being a kind of philosopher type manager who likes to take a step back and reflect and take his time over things and goes very abstract. I think it's important he has someone next to him who really cuts to the heart of immediate problems and gets immediate things done. And I think Beech was that was what Beech did at Rochdale. So Ian Dawes as the assistant, who looked very capable when he came in as a caretaker earlier in the season. I think he's got a vital role to play as in terms of supporting Hill, because I think he will always need a logistics man alongside him. I do believe. So yeah, that's an important dynamic, and I think it with Hill, because he thinks so long term and he can take such a bigger picture perspective. I think it's always important that he has a right man alongside him who's very much in the here and now and is very logical and logistical in that sense. So yeah, very much so. Ian Dawes has got a big part to play, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Now, if you want to use everything that you've learned about Keith Hill in this podcast, lots of things that Mike has said that could be interesting for the remainder of the season, then there is, Mike, a free case study which will hopefully help you with your approach to betting.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting period since lockdown, since I started really applying the manager profile into betting, and I've had really good success with it because there's patterns of behaviour according to manager personality types, and these patterns hold true from club to club, manager to manager. So you can begin to see kind of the different ways in which teams behave. It's so hard nowadays to predict on team strength because of data science, that this team's should be this price against this team, because, it's the degrees of accuracy that these algorithms and these computers are coming up with now, relative seam strength, it's kind of almost impossible to win that price-based strategy. You understand profiling, though, you can begin to come at it through the side door, so to speak, and pick out scenarios where a team might actually be value, but then that same team you wouldn't want to back them the following week. So this case study just kind of explains how it all works, and how it can be used as a successful betting strategy.